Hey listeners, thanks for dropping in. I'm Christy.
And I'm Melissa. And this is Buried Motives, where we dig deep into the details of some of the most gruesome
Dirtbag murderers.
Hey listeners.
Welcome back to Buried Motives.
We are excited you're here for our final case for spooky season.
Yes.
It's our Halloween case, and Christy has been taunting me all day about how great this case is going to be and how much she's going to scare me.
I'm so excited to get Melissa's take on this, but also your guys's, because you guys, it finally happened. We have at last dropped a new episode on actual Halloween. It's October 31st when this airs, so happy Halloween, listeners!
We hope you have a fabulous day today.
We really do. If you've been listening for a while, you all know that I love Halloween and spooky season. I was going to list all of the things that I love about it, but I enjoy everything about it. As you also know, Melissa and I generally cover cases that go along with the holidays. Last year, Melissa told us the case of Matthew Forrester. The victim in that case reminded Melissa of me, so if you haven't listened to that one yet, I invite you to go back and listen. Other cases that we have done episodes on for Halloween include Ed Gein, William Liskey, William Michael Dennis, and Ronald Clark O'Brien. So if you're wanting to binge Halloween-inspired cases today, we've got you covered. Just go back to all the Octobers. The majority of the cases that I just mentioned happened on October 31st. This year I decided to go in a little bit of a different direction. I am not covering a case that happened on Halloween. Instead, I am covering a case that involves two popular aspects of celebrating spooky season. Any guesses what those two things are?
Yeah, I know you. It's something haunted.
Yes. Haunted houses and horror movies. Two things that I love.
But not clowns.
No. No, I did go through one haunted clown house, though. I'm still proud of myself. My girls can attest. And I think I am able to enjoy going through a haunted house or watch a scary movie because I know that it isn't real. But what if it is? What if a house claimed to be haunted inspired one of the most infamous horror movies of all time? For this episode, we are going to discuss possibly the most widely known haunted house in America and the dark past that made it that way.
Amityville?
Yes.
It shocked me when I found out Lorraine and Ed were real people.
Yes, I love Lorraine and Ed. No surprise.
It just gave me chills to know that those are real people.
Yes. And just all the different houses that they've been in is remarkable. And there's a lot of movies that have been made by the houses that they've gone into. Mm-hmm. And I am going to talk at the end about Ed and Lorraine pertaining to this case. The house in question, like Melissa just guessed, is located at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, which is a suburban neighborhood on the South Shore of Long Island, New York. This house is so famous that I think when most people hear the word Amityville, they automatically think of this house.
Think of horror.
Yes, it has to be the most famous thing that Amityville is known for. Or that's just me and I'm weird.
I wonder if that's what they want to be known for.
Probably not. The home is a large 3-story Dutch colonial house. In photos, there are certain statues and a sign on the yard lamp post that read, High Hopes. At the time, these details would not seem weird, but they are definitely eerie to me after the fact. I have to explain these statues to you guys if you don't know what I'm talking about. There is a stone circle raised a step from the ground in the center of the yard in the front of the house. On this platform is a statue of Saint Joseph. Saint Joseph is holding baby Jesus, but not cradling him. Instead, he is holding baby Jesus in front of himself from under the armpits with the baby Jesus facing away from him. Around this, there are statues of little children who are kneeling and praying while they face the Saint Joseph and Jesus statue. And I'm thinking that they're children. Again, not totally bizarre for the time that this all took place, but so eerie when you look back after learning what took place on the property.
Like they were trying to ward off evil spirits.
They were.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And even just the statue that they chose. They're putting like Christ right out there.
Yes.
The power of Christ compels you.
and will protect you.
Yes.
And then even the sign to say high hopes as you're walking up to the house.
Yeah, it's eerie.
It is. The owner of the home at the time actually went to Montreal, Canada to have the statues made because he was afraid of the evil that he felt inside his house. He had these statues installed just months prior to the family massacre that took place there. The owner felt like something was off, so perhaps he purchased the statues in high hopes that it would protect his home and family. The house is still standing. It has had a makeover, and I believe that the address has been changed. It sounds like the more recent owners are not experiencing any hauntings and do not really want true crime buffs to come and see the house for themselves.
So the statues worked?
I think the statues have been removed. No, the statues did not work. The statues were there when the family was murdered. The house doesn't look as creepy now, but it sure did in 1974 when the murders took place inside of it. The house had these 2 half-rounded windows on the top floor that look a little ominous. Some people think it made the house look like it had eyes and took on a persona of its own.
Yeah, I'm one of those people.
Yes. Maybe I'll have to post a picture of the house when I post about this case so that you can all see what I'm talking about. I want to note that the lack of current hauntings being reported makes some people believe that it never was haunted in the first place. I'm going to go over what we know for sure happened in the home, as well as what was reported in the hauntings and the aftermath of that. I am not saying it for sure happened, but I'm not saying it didn't either. In one of the movies made about this case, one of the characters says that a house doesn't have memories, but I'm not so sure. We will discuss it, but although some things have been exaggerated throughout the years, I do think some sinister things took place inside 112 Ocean Avenue, leading up to the mass murder that took place there, as well as afterwards.
Yeah, it's got a creepy vibe.
It totally does. I'm so excited to go through this one with you.
That's because you're so excited to freak me out. I'm just so glad we are recording in the day and not at nighttime.
It's true. Especially after your creepy one.
Yeah.
The family to meet their grisly end inside this infamous house was the DeFeo family. At the time of the murders, on November 14th, 1974, the DeFeos were a family of 7, a mom and dad and 5 children. This entire family but one would be annihilated by the oldest son, and a family of 7 would become one within a short 15-minute time span.
Because he was possessed.
I think so. He could have been. For real, for real.
For real, these guys.
It's true. Ronald Joseph DeFeo Sr. was born on November 16th, 1930. He was 2 days shy of his 44th birthday at the time of his death. Ronald Sr. was born in Brooklyn, New York, and was outlived by both of his parents. Ronald Sr.'s mother, Antoinette, or Annette Bianco, was born in Italy, and her father, Rocco Anthony DeFeo, was born in Manhattan, New York. They raised their Italian family in New York, where Ronald Sr. met and married his beautiful wife, Louise Marie Brigante. Louise was born on November 3rd, 1931 in Brooklyn. Together, she and Ronald had 5 children, 3 sons and 2 daughters. All 5 of their children were born in Brooklyn, but the family would later move to the quiet suburb of Amityville. They moved soon after their last child was born. Their firstborn child was a son, Ronald Joseph DeFeo Jr., born on September 26, 1951. Ronald Sr. was 21 at the time, and Louise was 20. Ronald DeFeo Jr. was often called Ronnie or Butch, so to avoid confusion, I will refer to him as Butch, which I believe is the name that most people did call him. When Butch was almost 4 years old, the couple welcomed a baby girl, Dawn Teresa, born on July 29, 1956. Nearly 5 years later, Dawn was followed by another baby girl, Allison Louise, born on August 16, 1961. Next, the DeFeos welcomed another son, Mark Gregory, born on September 4th, 1962. Dawn and Mark were only 12 and a half months apart, Irish twins, if you will. And then finally, the baby boy of the family was born 3 years after that, John Matthew, born on October 24th, 1965. Sadly, this young family would be destroyed by the firstborn son, Butch, when he was 23 years old. If I mathed right, Ronald and Louise were in their early 40s at the time of their deaths. Dawn was just 18, Allison was 13, Mark was 12, and little John was only 9 years old when he died.
That's sad.
Mm-hmm. Aside from Butch, the family share a gravesite, and on the shared headstone above the family name, it is inscribed, quote, Saint Joseph, pray for us. Ronald Sr. worked hard to provide for his family. He worked for Louise's father, so his father-in-law, at a Buick dealership in Brooklyn. As Ronald became successful and started to be able to provide for his family more, he and Louise decided that they wanted to move out of the city and look for a house in Long Island. The house they found at 112 Ocean Avenue would turn out to be the house that they would take their last breaths in. At the beginning, the house and lifestyle were ideal. Plenty of space to raise a family in. The giant house faced the river, they had a swimming pool, and even a private dock and boathouse.
Oh, this is sounding awesome.
It is a beautiful property. However, things are often not what they seem, and things happening inside of the DeFeo home were not always good things.
Did they get a really good deal on it when they purchased it?
Not this family, but the family afterwards sure do. Ronald Sr. was said to have an awful temper. When he got riled, he would often fly into a fit of rage and violence. The children would witness fights between their parents, and Ronald ruled the house like an authoritarian. Ronald was said to be extra hard on his firstborn son, Butch. In his Italian culture, at the time, the oldest son was to be the family heir, and Ronald didn't think that Butch was capable of the job.
Why is that with every firstborn almost?
I know. We don't need to put the pressure on them.
Cut them some slack.
Yes.
They're doing okay.
As a result, Butch became quite withdrawn for a time. He gained weight and was teased mercilessly for it at school. As a result, he didn't have many friends. Ironically, Ronald would try and encourage his son to stand up for himself and fight back at the bullies, not recognizing or admitting that he himself was also one of his son's bullies, perhaps the biggest one. Ronald expected perfection from Butch. He was not allowed to talk back or disobey orders. But Butch didn't stay a sullen and shy little boy forever. He grew tall and strong and began to fight back, especially against his father.
Seems like he was living up to his name.
Yes. Ronald and Butch would get into some heated arguments that often led to boxing matches between them.
In the house?
Yes.
Oh.
And it was said that the fights between them would break out over superficial things. It didn't take much, and it happened often. So father and son actually duking it out.
Sounds like that's the natural evolution of it's time for the child to move out of the house.
Yes. However, before long, Butch began to exceed the rage that his father had displayed. Enough so that Ronald and Louise became concerned.
That's saying something for a guy that's already rageful.
Yes. That's what I thought. He had to be pretty rage-filled for Ronald to be like, whoa, this is not okay. This is past what's acceptable.
Next level.
Mm-hmm. Because of this, Ronald and Louise took Butch to see a psychiatrist. But he refused to cooperate and just behaved in a passive-aggressive manner during the appointments. When this didn't work, the DeFeos tried to console their son with gifts, even purchasing a speedboat for him while he was in his teens. To no one's surprise listening, this tactic did not work either. Butch's behavior just grew worse.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Right? If we could just spoil the bad behavior out of them, wouldn't that be great?
So much easier.
Costly, but less so in the long run, maybe. The family were religious and held family prayers. The kids attended parochial schools, where they would learn religion along with other subjects. Butch almost made it through parochial school, but instead he was kicked out at the age of 17.
Why did he get kicked out?
Funny you should ask, because I'm right about to tell you.
Oh. I'll wait. Stop asking questions.
We all love that about you, Melissa.
I just have to know.
I know.
I don't know the background of the hit. Like, I've seen the movie, but I don't know the background of the actual family.
And that's what I find so fascinating is the media ran with the hauntings afterwards, and this isn't talked about a lot. So I did really want to dig deep into the history of it.
And it sounds like this was not an unforeseen thing. We can already see it building.
Absolutely.
There's always an explanation, Christy. It's never the supernatural.
Well, I don't know. We'll see. If that's true, then why did the hauntings take place afterwards?
I don't know. An explanation that I don't have right now.
Okay, we'll see. I'm really curious what you'll think at the end. But to answer your question about why he got kicked out of school, at this time, he was using drugs like LSD, speed, and especially heroin, and had begun stealing things. He had also become very violent towards other students.
Oh, those sound like valid reasons.
Yep.
This seems hardcore.
Yeah. Butch now had friends, but even they were starting to notice his behavior escalate. One day, Butch was out hunting with some of his friends. With a straight face, Butch calmly raised his loaded rifle and pointed it at one of his friends' face, just to watch him get scared. The boy didn't take this as a joke and ran away. Later that day, it was said that Butch asked this boy why he left, acting like it wasn't a big deal. But it was a big deal.
Yeah, that's a huge deal.
Yeah.
Had he spent enough time with the psychologist for them to have any insight into his personality? Because it seems like he doesn't have a lot of awareness of other people's feelings.
No, it didn't sound like those appointments went very far.
Okay.
He just pretty much shut it down. There would be another incident before the murders involving Butch pointing a gun in someone's face. Allegedly, one night, Butch could hear his parents fighting. Butch had enough of listening to his father scream at his mother. He grabbed his 12-gauge shotgun that he kept in his bedroom and loaded a shell into the chamber. Butch stormed downstairs and immediately held the gun to his father's face. He hollered at his father, quote, "Leave that woman alone. I'm going to kill you, you fat F. This is it." It is said that Butch actually pulled the trigger, but for some reason the gun did not go off.
What?
Yes. Leaving everyone stunned, Butch just left the house after this happened.
How old was he at this time?
He was 18. And at this time, Butch was working for the family business in Brooklyn at the Buick dealership, owned by his grandfather. Butch would later admit that he really didn't do any work, but was given a good paycheck at the end of each week. His parents bought him a car, so he spent most of his money on drugs and alcohol. Things continued this way leading up to the murders. Neighbors had mixed feelings about the DeFeo family. The DeFeos were known to be devout Catholics and would even hold prayer huddles on Sunday mornings on their property. They were known to be very giving and kind, the type of neighbors who were always willing to lend a hand and help out. They were even said to watch out for another family whose husband had passed away. The other kids had friends who often came to play at the house. One of Dawn's friends later described her as sweet and funny. She said that she had been at their house a lot of times for pool parties. When the same friend described Butch, she said he was the quote-unquote black sheep. She said, quote, "He was always lurking around, and he seemed like a creepy guy. He kind of looked like Charles Manson."
That's a creepy comparison.
Mm-hmm.
Wish I had more time to look it up, but I think that there were some rumors that he was possessed.
If you look at photos of him, he kind of does.
Yeah, so there were some that believed he was possessed, but there's no evidence of it.
But how can you get evidence of that?
Yeah, I don't know.
But like you said, that is a creepy comparison.
Yeah.
So does that mean that they had this similar countenance or demeanor about them?
Maybe.
Maybe demons present in a certain way.
That is a creepy thought.
That really is.
There's got to be another reason for it.
But it was kind of a creepy thing that she said. Ronald's behavior was also not lost on the neighbors, despite his friendly and helpful disposition. One neighbor later said that, quote, "Ron Sr. was quite abusive to the children, especially Butch. Ron Sr. would go on an abusing spree and then go pray in the front of the St. Joseph statue for forgiveness. Neighbors didn't want to get involved because Ron Sr. bragged about having mob connections." I'm unsure if this is true, but it seems like most of the people who knew the DeFeos believed it to be true.
That would be an interesting fact because it might explain why Butch so readily adopted this violent personality. If he was seeing violence all around him that was connected to the mob, that would have been a normal thing for him. And so it makes sense that he would point a gun and not think twice about it.
Ooh, that is true. It would also mean that he could have witnessed people being reckless and getting away with it.
Mm-hmm. It might explain his personality a little bit more.
That's a really good insight, Melissa. 2 weeks before the murders, father and son experienced the final crack in their relationship. Near the end of October in 1974, Butch was given the task at work to deposit $20,000 to the bank, approximately $1,800 in cash and nearly $20,000 in checks.
Oh. I'm guessing they didn't make it there.
They didn't.
You just put that in the hands of a drug addict.
Yeah, and an entitled one. Feeling like his family owed him, Butch convinced a friend who also worked at the dealership to stage a robbery with him. If the friend helped, Butch agreed to split the loot with him. The two left the dealership at around 12:30 in the afternoon. It took them 2 hours to return, and when they did, they said that they were robbed at gunpoint while waiting at a red light. The police were called, but Ronald was at the dealership when the two returned, and he instantly knew the truth. Police showed up and started to question Butch and his friend. Butch denied having anything to do with it. The police were questioning Butch about why it took 2 hours to come back to the dealership. This annoyed Butch, ultimately causing him to bang his fist against the hood of a car and start yelling and cursing. Ronald was ranting about how these two should never have been allowed to deposit the money in the first place.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a very wise choice.
But the police are there and witnessing this chaos, so it was said that the police decided to back off and let things cool down. On the Friday before the murders, Butch was supposed to go into the police station to look at mugshots of his alleged robber. Butch told his dad that he wasn't going. As you can imagine, a fight about the alleged robbery broke out, and Ronald ended up hollering to his son, quote, "You've got the devil on your back." Butch retaliated by screaming, quote, "You fat prick, I'll kill you."
Oh, this does not sound like a demonic possession.
Not right now. It for sure doesn't.
No.
But just wait till we get to the murders. This verbal exchange took place on Friday, November 8th, and the murders would take place just 6 days later on Thursday, November 14th, 1974. And just a little side note, when I looked at pictures at this time, it looks like Butch had slimmed right down, and his father had put on a few pounds. So I wonder if Butch kept calling his father fat because he knew how much that hurt him during his childhood.
Oh, yeah.
Because this is 2 quotes now where he's calling his father fat, and that was a sore spot for him.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but the roles had reversed.
And now he's the one that's feeling powerful.
Yeah. As we get into the murders, I do want to point out that many people believe that Butch did have the devil on his back and was being influenced by a darker force. This idea is supported by those who believe in the hauntings that took place inside the DeFeo home afterwards. So let's discuss the murders and the trial, and then get into the hauntings. Butch DeFeo was sitting in his bedroom in the early morning hours of November 14th. The rest of his family and the neighborhood were fast asleep. Just after 3 o'clock a.m., Butch grabbed his .35 caliber Marlin rifle from his closet and began walking towards the room where his parents slept. Butch walked to the foot of their bed and quietly watched his parents sleep for a brief moment. Butch then raised his rifle and first shot his father, Ronald Sr. The first shot entered Ronald Sr.'s back, glided through his kidney, and then exited through his chest. Butch fired a second round into his father's back. This bullet hit the base of Ronald's spine and lodged inside his neck. With his father dead, Butch turned his aim towards his mother, Louise, and again fired 2 shots, leaving her dead with a collapsed right lung and a shattered rib cage. Next, Butch headed towards the bedroom that his 2 brothers, Mark and John, shared. They were both still sound asleep in their beds. Butch stood in between his brothers' beds and looked down on them before shooting. Mark's spinal cord was severed, and his body twitched for a second after he was shot. Both Mark and John sustained major damage to their internal organs. 1 shot each took their lives. Allison was next. Butch shot her in the head, and she died instantly. Dawn was saved for last. She was also shot in the head. The bullet entered just below her left ear and exited through her temple. The damage to her body was so great that the left side of her face was said to be gone. By 3:15 a.m., it was all over.
Did he have a bad relationship with the rest of his family? Because it sounds like up until this point, it was just his dad.
It was just his dad. He had a good relationship with his family and was said to be quite close with Dawn. No one heard anything. The only thing that neighbors reportedly heard that morning was DeFeo's dog barking. He was locked inside the boathouse. Unfazed by what he had just done, Butch took a shower, trimmed his beard, and got dressed. He put on blue jeans and work boots. Next, Butch placed his rifle and bloodied clothing in a pillowcase and took it with him as he drove away from the house where his entire family lay dead. Butch drove into Brooklyn and threw the evidence-filled pillowcase into a storm drain.
Curious that the devil would take care of the evidence.
Yes, and that does get brought up. Acting like nothing was out of the ordinary, Butch showed up to his work at his grandfather's Buick dealership by 6 o'clock in the morning for work. During his work shift, Butch called his family home several times, as well as a few calls to his girlfriend.
He's even trying to create himself an alibi.
Yes. Butch acted surprised when his father didn't show up for work, and so he left work early. That afternoon, once he finished work, Butch went to his 19-year-old girlfriend's house, and I'm going to leave out her name and his friends' names on purpose.
Okay, wait, though. He left work early because he's concerned about his parents, but he doesn't go home. He goes to his friend's house.
To his girlfriend's house.
Okay.
From his girlfriend's house, Butch again tried calling his home, telling her that he couldn't get a hold of his family.
Again, trying to create a witness of his concern.
Yep. Butch took his girlfriend shopping and then went to go and visit a friend, also telling him that he hadn't been able to get a hold of his parents.
He's so concerned.
Yes.
But he's not going home to check.
No, not yet. I assume not wanting to go home to face his actions, Butch spent the rest of the afternoon hanging out with friends, taking heroin, and drinking. The friend that Butch had seen earlier in the afternoon had told Butch that he would be going to the bar called Henry's at around 6 o'clock that evening. Butch said he would see him there. Just after 6, Butch showed up to Henry's bar, and his friend walked in a few minutes later. Again, Butch acted concerned about his family. He said all the cars were at the house, but it was locked and he couldn't get in. Butch told his friends that he was going to go home and break a window to get inside to check on his family.
Didn't he live at the house?
He did, but he said he couldn't get in. He didn't even go check, I'm assuming.
No.
This is just a story he's saying.
There's so many holes in it, though.
Oh, there is. Butch left the bar, but within a short amount of time, he ran back in. This time in a panic. He hollered to his friend, quote, "You gotta help me! Someone shot my mother and father!" And I say to that, yeah, it was you dirtbag. Butch and his friend, along with a few other people from the bar, quickly sprung into action and went with Butch in his car to his house. Butch's friend was the first one to go upstairs and discover the bodies of Ronald and Louise. Butch just sat and cried, acting all distressed. Another man who was there with them called the police from the kitchen phone. The call came into the Suffolk County, New York Emergency Dispatch switchboard at 6:35 p.m. I was able to find the transcript for the call. The man tells the operator that there has been a shooting, and when they ask if anyone has been hurt, he replies, quote, "Yeah, it's everybody's dead." The operator says, "What do you mean, everybody is dead?" And the man says, quote, "I don't know what happened. Kid come running into the bar. He says everybody in the family was killed, and we came down here." The operator then hands the phone over to a police officer, and within 10 minutes, police arrive at 112 Ocean Avenue. The house with a sign out front that read "High Hopes" quickly became the most horrific crime scene of most of the officers' careers.
It's so disturbing.
It was.
So people that are hanging out with Butch that night, did they say that he acted abnormal in any way?
No, even the police believe that he has nothing to do with it at the beginning.
No, but he's not acting possessed, is what I mean.
Oh, no. But I don't know how possession works. I don't. Like, once you're possessed, is that it? Can you be influenced by evil in one moment and not in the next?
Well, I think most people would say yes.
I don't know.
He was possessed enough to kill all of his family, but then all of a sudden he's perfectly fine to go get high with his friends and they don't notice anything's different?
Right.
That's suspicious.
It is. He was influenced by the dark force in the house.
Okay. So it was only while he was in the house then, Christy?
That's what the movies will tell you too.
Huh.
That when you get away from the house, you're okay. It's the house. At first, police just discovered the parents and the brothers. But when they came back downstairs, Butch, who was crying at the kitchen table, told the officers that he also had 2 sisters. Police went back up and discovered both girls. I saw crime scene photos of this family annihilation, and they are horrific. There's some that aren't so bad, but when you dig really deep, you can find the really bad photos. There is so much blood everywhere. Police knew that they needed the help of forensic investigators to even begin processing this bloodbath of a home. By 7 o'clock p.m., the house was buzzing with authorities and investigators, and the streets soon became filled with onlookers. Suffolk County Detective Gaspar Randazzo, which, by the way, what a fantastic name.
Gaspar. All right.
Gaspar Randazzo was the first to question Butch, who was first thought of to be the sole survivor of this horrific multi-homicide.
Because he wasn't home.
Right, that he just got lucky. When asked who he thought could kill his entire family, Butch answered that he thought it was a man named Luis Fellini, a mafia hitman who had long-standing beef with his family. It would turn out, though, that this hitman was out of town at the time of the murder, so it would be quite easy to rule him out.
Right, but this further substantiates their ties to the mob.
Yes, it was even said that this man lived with them for a couple of years. So it is suspicious. I totally think they had mob ties, but allegedly. Police set up a temporary command center at the next-door neighbor's house and continued to question Butch over there. Initially, they had begun talking to him while at the kitchen table. Before long, police decided that if Butch was right and this was a mob hit, then Butch could be in danger. So they decided to take him to the station in order to protect him.
Logical sequence.
Yep, I agree. Butch told police that he went to bed around 2 o'clock in the morning after watching TV in his room. He said that he awoke around 4 o'clock, and when he walked past the upstairs bathroom, he saw his brother's wheelchair outside the door and heard the toilet flush, so everyone was still okay at that time. He continued to tell police that he tried to go back to sleep, but when he couldn't, he decided to just get up and go into work early, making it seem like he was gone for work before the tragic events took place. Butch stuck to his story about not being able to reach anyone at the house and how he finally went home to check on them. He said he climbed through the kitchen window and went straight into his parents' room, where he found them. He then raced back to the bar for help.
Why does he not have a key for his own house?
I don't know what his story was about the key.
This doesn't make any sense to me.
He just said it was all locked up.
Okay.
He couldn't get in.
It's an inconsistency.
It is. It's all lies anyways.
Yeah.
Butch admitted to the police about taking heroin and even confessed to one time setting his father's boat on fire for an insurance scam, gaining the officers' trust in the process. They let Butch sleep on a cot at the station to make sure he was out of danger. They were likely feeling sorry for him that he had lost his family in such a violent way. However, no one would feel sorry for this savage killer for long. Once authorities began to examine the evidence left at the house, their sights quickly turned towards Butch. An officer found a couple of empty shell boxes in Butch's room that ended up matching the ammo used in the killings.
Oh, he didn't cover his tracks very well.
No, they were empty boxes, but the officer saw them and thought, well, I'll take them in just in case, not realizing that it would help to crack the case. When interviewing Butch's friend that discovered Ronald Sr. and Louise, they learned that Butch was a gun enthusiast and had recently staged a robbery to rip off the family business. One thing that seemed weird to police was that every single person was found laying face down in their beds. First of all, if the alleged killer entered the house during the day, like Butch suggested, no one was likely to be in bed in their night clothes, let alone all 6 of them. Second, it was curious that everyone was laying face down. It was said that the bodies looked staged, but forensics proved that the bodies hadn't been moved. Police thought that the family had to have been drugged, but all 6 toxicology reports were clean. Butch later claimed that he did drug his family, but that wasn't true. This fact is so curious to me. How did everyone sleep through the loud sounds of 8 rifle shots? Neighbors didn't hear anything. But the positions that everyone was found dead in would suggest that they didn't hear what was happening either, and it was not typical for them all to be sleeping prone. Was something darker at play here? Once found, the gun was said to not have been fitted with any type of sound suppressor on it. I don't know a lot about guns, but I do know that firing 8 shots from a .35 caliber rifle inside your house would not be a quiet experience.
Nope, I don't think it would.
It is eerie to look at these pictures and see everyone laying face down. It does look like their bodies are staged, but the blood evidence proves that they were not staged.
Were they all in the same prone position?
Similar.
That is interesting.
And that nobody woke up.
But could he have commanded them to lay on their stomachs? Maybe they all did wake up and he told them to lay down on their stomach or else he would shoot them and then he shot them anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. Because even why did nobody go to run out of the house when they started to hear the shots? Nobody hid.
Right.
The more that police grew suspicious of Butch and questioned him, the more his story unraveled. He went from telling police that the mobster and another guy woke him up at 3:30 in the morning with a gun to his head and led him from room to room while they were killing his family, all the way to claiming that his sister Dawn killed everyone and then he killed her in a fit of rage, although this claim about his sister would come out much later.
And not match any of the evidence.
No, the stories he tells are absurd. There's so many different versions of this that he eventually keeps telling through different appeals and during the trial. Speaking of Dawn, though, her nightgown was said to have unburned gunpowder on it, suggesting that she could have helped to kill her family. On the flip side of this, though, Dawn could have gotten gunpowder on her nightgown just by being in proximity to the muzzle of the gun when it went off.
Yeah.
This does not prove that she shot the gun.
No, it was just close to her when it went off.
Yes. So a lot of skeptics are saying she had to have been involved. There's no way that everyone can sleep through this and there only be one gunman. But I don't think she had anything to do with it.
Did the family have another gun that shot that caliber of bullet?
I didn't read that there was. I didn't really go down that rabbit hole because I don't think she had anything to do with killing her family. I really don't. Also, if she did kill the family first, then how would Butch have gotten her back into her bed on her stomach to shoot her afterwards? He said he knocked her out, but there was no evidence of this. But again, her head was badly injured.
And what were they testing for when they did their drug panels? Like, did they test for everything? Because there's lots of drugs that, especially since he uses street drugs, that he could have got his hand on that wouldn't show up on a drug panel.
Especially in 1974.
Yeah. So just because they didn't find drugs doesn't mean that he didn't drug them.
True. All of this information about Dawn was another curious fact of the case to me. That being said, some people claim that Butch was having a sexual relationship with his sister, but there was no evidence to support that claim either. But there's a lot of people that say, yeah, that was happening. I didn't find any written statements, just that was a theory.
The rumor.
Yes.
Rumors come from crazy places.
And I think that sometimes people can create rumors that didn't even actually happen after the fact.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, Dawn was involved? Oh, yeah, I heard that they were incestuous.
Yeah.
Despite his lies, before long, Butch finally confessed. He said, quote, "It all started so fast. Once I started, I just couldn't stop. It went so fast." It is believed that his original plan was to kill his parents, not his siblings, but evil overtook him and he couldn't stop. Butch told police where he ditched his bloody clothing and his gun. When the gun was examined, a ballistics test matched the projectile fragments recovered from the family's bodies.
That sounds pretty conclusive.
Yep. We could do an entire other episode just about the trial and the media frenzy that encircled this case, but I'm going to give you just the basics so that we have time to go through the alleged hauntings. But just know that the trial was wild, complete with outbursts from both Butch and the lawyers. Butch's trial began on October 14th, 1975. He pleaded not guilty based on insanity. Butch claimed that he was, quote, possessed by Satan that grisly night. He said that he heard voices coming from the house telling him to kill his family. Butch continued by saying he had to kill his family to preserve his own life. He had heard his family's voices in the house discussing murdering him. Butch also claimed that a woman figure with blackened hands handed him the gun right before he did it. Some people try to explain this away by saying it was his sister Dawn who handed him the gun. The defense psychiatrist testified that Butch was, quote-unquote, insane and not criminally responsible for what took place inside the house. The prosecution had a psychiatrist of their own examine Butch. This psychiatrist admitted that Butch did suffer from antisocial personality disorder, which was worsened by his drug and alcohol use.
Knew he had something.
Yep. That being said, this doctor also said that Butch knew exactly what he was doing because of his actions afterwards. Like you said, Butch got rid of evidence, tried to create an alibi, and blamed the crime on someone else. It was also pointed out that Butch had asked an officer how he could collect his father's life insurance. With this evidence, the prosecution naturally argued that Butch had premeditated the murders and that his motive for killing everyone in his family was for financial gain. It was also speculated that Butch killed his siblings out of jealousy, and his parents, especially his father, out of revenge.
The motivation for money fits in with his drug use, the ties to the mafia, and his previous actions for stealing.
That's true. But I have a feeling that it would be more so out of just the anger and hatred towards his father.
But killing off the siblings so that he doesn't have to share the inheritance would explain their deaths.
Could be, but I don't know if I credit him with even the intelligence to think that all through, to be honest.
Okay.
But possibly.
Yeah. I mean, he's not a mastermind, obviously. We saw that with the robbery before, but this is a pattern behavior now. Mm-hmm. He's now tried twice to steal from his father.
True. And he has had a problem with stealing.
Mm-hmm.
But had his relationship with his father not been so horrible, I don't know that this would have happened in the first place.
Oh, no. It was probably an added bonus for him that he got to kill his dad because they had such an awful relationship.
Yeah. So perhaps this breakdown is both.
That's right. It's always both, Christy.
That's right.
Except demonic possession.
Yeah. But I do wonder, I have heard stories where there's a serial killer and someone has survived, and they say they actually change. They look like a different person, their eyes change, just their whole countenance is different. And I wonder if that is evil taking over. And so I wonder if in that moment, that horrific act of killing his parents, did evil take over and he just went for it and killed everybody. Couldn't stop himself, like he said.
Well, evil has to take over, or else you wouldn't do this as the same person.
Right.
Yeah.
It just gives us a lot to think about. The defense argued that Butch was being abused by his father. They also argued that Butch was under duress when he confessed and was never allowed counsel during his interrogations. But he had, in fact, been offered the right to counsel, which he turned down. Butch himself went from not being able to identify his mother, to not remembering anything that happened, to saying he felt good after it all happened. Not happy, but good. He also said that he was God. Ultimately, Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr. was found guilty of 6 counts of second-degree murder on November 21st, 1975, almost exactly 1 year from the date of the murders. Interestingly, at first, the jury members voted 10-2. 2 people were not convinced that Butch was in a sound mental state when he murdered his family. But after reviewing the court transcripts, the vote became unanimous. 2 weeks later, Butch was given 6 life sentences of 25 years in prison to be served concurrently. Butch was sent to the Sullivan Correctional Facility in the town of Fallsburg in New York. Butch made many appeals and attempts at parole, but all were denied. It was during one of these attempts that he presented the story that his sister was the one who killed everyone and that he just killed her. Another story claimed that his sister killed their father, and then his mother killed all of his siblings before he killed his mother.
That sounds a little crazy.
Yes, Butch made many more outrageous claims. They are actually laughable. He even claimed that he was married and living away from the house at the time of the murders. Now, I do believe that he got married briefly, but not until after he was incarcerated. His divorce records state that he met his bride in 1985, married her in 1989, and divorced her in 1993.
That was quick.
And I left her name out too. Poor girl.
She married a convict in prison.
That's true. I take it back. And I believe she lied for him at first too and was like, no, we were married then. So I guess she's a dirtbag too.
Didn't they know that there would be records to corroborate their story?
They did find the records. So basically, the only thing that we can really trust regarding Butch is that he was a pathological liar. These lies, along with the haunting claims later, has made this case one of the most controversial cases I think I have ever researched. We could honestly do a series on this one. In another appeal, Butch also claimed that his lawyer talked him into saying a lot of the things that he did during his trial in order to help him publish a tantalizing book and possible movie deals, which we will get into in a bit. During his parole hearing in 1999, Butch was quoted saying, quote, "I loved my family very much." Thankfully, possessed by the devil or not, Butch DeFeo was never released from prison. He died only a few years ago, on March 12th of 2021, at the age of 69.
With what I know about the coverage on the house and the hauntings that happen afterwards, his jail time and death just seem anticlimactic.
Right. He just went to jail and died, and that's the last we heard of him. What's not anticlimactic is what happens afterwards. Because as you all know, there is still a lot to discuss regarding what happened after the murders. This episode does not end with the death of the dirtbag. After the murders, the DeFeo home sat vacant. It would take some time before a family was willing to sleep in the same rooms where 6 people were brutally shot and killed. Enter the well-known and controversial couple, George and Kathy Lutz. George and Kathy Lutz, both aged 32 at the time, moved into the murder house on 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville on December 18th, 1975. They moved joyfully and just in time for Christmas. However, it would not take long for their joy to be snuffed out. Only 28 days later, the Lutz family would flee from their new home in the middle of the night. They did not take any of their belongings with them, and they never once returned to the house.
It would be so hard. You're so excited to be moving into this new house. You think you've got this great deal on it. life is going to be amazing. And then you lose everything because you just leave it behind because you're terrified.
Yes. And that to me really speaks to me believing that some of these things likely did happen, because who would just flee their house in the middle of the night and not come back for their belongings?
Oh, I'm not saying they don't believe it. If you believe strongly that something's happening because of something else, doesn't necessarily mean that belief is true, though.
So you think they were all hallucinating the things that they saw inside the house? Even the children?
You can have a shared hallucination, a shared delusion.
You're not going to ruin Halloween for me, Melissa.
There's got to be a logical explanation for it, Christy.
Was there a logical explanation in your last case?
Yeah.
What, that the mother was involved in the murder?
No.
So she knew where she was?
I think that she felt guilty because she pushed her daughter into the marriage. And then she had really deductive reasoning because she was looking for things.
She knew exactly where she was and exactly how she got there.
Well, she knew that they were going to the barn. There's only so many places in a barn you can hide somebody.
So she got lucky and picked the one spot?
Yes.
You're backtracking. That's not what you said when we were recording. You traitor.
Today I feel differently.
You're wishy-washy.
I'm a fence sitter.
You are. You're going to get haunted just to prove yourself wrong.
I get to sit on the fence and argue both sides. It is interesting that there's these two sides and they both feel very strongly. Where I sit is that there must be some explanation for it. I may not know what that explanation is, but there must be some explanation somewhere for it.
Definitely. And sometimes we just don't really know.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just kind of looking at the facts and what's being claimed, and everyone can decide for themselves.
Right. And sometimes you don't have the facts to even draw the proper conclusions.
Okay, let's get back into the house. The Amityville home sat vacant for about a year after the murders. It took 13 months and a huge price reduction to finally get it sold after the murders took place there. Some say that George and Kathy had no idea about the murders, but I believe that they did. The house was their dream home, and they could actually afford it because of the new low price of $80,000. George said that the house was worth at least $140,000 to $150,000. Today, that would be like getting a house valued at nearly $900,000 for under $500,000. So it was a really good deal.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, the house was on the waterfront to a river. It had a full basement, a boathouse, a livable attic, and a drive-in garage. The couple had looked at nearly 50 houses before they found this one. George said that the moment Kathy walked into the house, her entire face lit up. It was the one. Including the basement, the house was about 4,000 square feet. Perfect for George, Kathy, their 3 children, and their dog. The children belonged to Kathy from a previous marriage, but Kathy and George had been married for about a year, and they made a happy family together. The kids were said to be young, 2 boys, Daniel and Christopher, and a girl named Missy. Some of the DeFeo's items had been left inside the house, including the bed frames where they slept and were murdered. The bloody mattresses were taken out, but the Lutzes were said to use the old bed frames to sleep in. And I thought that was a bold choice.
Yeah, that's a little creepy.
Mm-hmm. They just put new mattresses down and that was it. Some things had been removed, but there were things definitely left in the house. The day that the family moved in, the dog was acting strange. One source said that the dog wouldn't go inside the house at first. George and Kathy called a priest in to bless the house. One report stated that they did this because they did know the history of the house and wanted to make sure that there wasn't any bad juju or energy left there.
Right. And they're already showing a propensity to believe in spirits.
Right. But they weren't worried about it enough to not buy the house. They were the first brave ones to live there afterwards. The priest did come, and while he went from room to room, he got an uneasy feeling. This feeling escalated when he entered one particular room. Despite being alone, while standing in this room, the priest felt something slap him across the face and heard a demonic voice tell him to get out. The priest blessed the house, but warned the couple not to let anyone sleep in that particular room. The Lutzes listened and turned that room into a sewing room for Kathy. This room was said to be the worst room in the house, and turned out to be the room where the 2 boys were murdered before they moved in. Ironically, the room next to this one was said to be the best feeling room. After the priest left the house, he was afflicted with unexplained painful boils on his hands. To the non-believers, I question why a priest would lie about this experience. And apparently, Ronald Sr. had asked a priest to come into the house before he was killed to perform an exorcism because he believed that the house had evil inside it.
It wasn't directed at his son, it was directed at the house.
Right. That's what Ronald was saying. And that was what the priest was saying now, too. That there's something bad in this house.
Mm-hmm. So the evil didn't start with Butch.
That's what they're suggesting.
Okay.
George seemed to be immediately affected by the house. He said it took him days to get warm, no matter what he did. He was freezing while everyone else felt comfortable. At first, he thought maybe he was just getting sick. It did not take long before most nights George would wake up between 3 and 3:30 in the morning. But most of the time, it was right at 3:15, the time believed to be when the murders took place.
The witching hour, that time is associated with lots of hauntings.
It is. And that is when he said he would wake up.
And so is that cold feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
George said that when he would wake up at this time, he would walk around the house and check on things and make sure the kids were okay. When he did this, he said that he often noticed the side door to the boathouse would be wide open, even though it had been closed and locked when he went to bed. George was cautious when it came to their boat because it was a large investment. It was fancy and new. He would make sure the boathouse was locked up each night, so when he saw the door open, he would go outside and lock it back up. So it was one of those things he was a little neurotic about making sure it was closed, so he knew that it hadn't been left open. Despite it being in the middle of the winter, the family soon noticed flies appearing in the house. They would especially show up in the sewing room, the room that the priest warned them about. Sometimes there would only be a few flies, but other times there would be a full-on infestation of flies in this room, literally hundreds of flies, in the middle of December.
That is odd. And why the boys' room? Was it because they were just so much more innocent?
I don't know, but that was the room that they said felt the worst. Their daughter Missy slept in the good room next to the sewing room. Missy soon began having an imaginary friend named Jody. Jody was able to appear to Missy in the form of not only a little boy, but also in the form of a pig.
Okay.
One of the nights that George went outside to close the boathouse door, he looked back at the house and could see an adult moving inside Missy's bedroom. He said that when he got back into the house, Kathy was still sleeping in her bed, and no one was in Missy's room with her. She was asleep, but he had clearly seen someone through the window. The family also said that they could see red eyes sometimes looking back at them from outside the window. Some people argue that maybe this was the form of the pig. Other people say it was likely the neighbor's cat who was so fat that George would call Pig.
Okay.
On another occasion, their son Danny suddenly had his fingers flattened. It sounded like his bedroom window spontaneously came crashing down on his hands that were placed on the windowsill. But as George and Kathy prepared to take him to the hospital and were about to leave, they realized that his fingers were suddenly fine. No bones were broken. It was like the injuries had vanished. Various friends of the Lutz family allegedly would hear strange noises inside the house when they would come to visit. One of these friends suggested that they go through the house and bless each room on their own. So George and Kathy tried this. They opened the window in each room, blessed it, and told whatever was inside the room to leave. Unfortunately, George stated that things only got worse after doing this.
They made the ghosties angry?
They did. You don't want to anger the ghosties. The couple would throw certain items away, and then those items would reappear in the home. One of those things in particular was a ceramic lion statue. They threw away the lion statue, and it suddenly reappeared inside the house. Everyone claimed that they didn't bring it back into the house. The lion would also move from where it was placed. Sometimes they would discover it in a different area of the room, or in a different room entirely. They couldn't get rid of it. Everyone in the house was affected in their own ways. Kathy would sometimes feel someone touching her when no one was with her. Sometimes, when she would look in the mirror, her reflection showed herself looking like an old lady. And I believe George witnessed this happening to her as well.
Like he saw her reflection in the mirror?
Or he would look at her sometimes, and for a second, she would look like an old lady. I didn't actually put this in here, but what I did learn is that Kathy later, when she died, the illness that she died of made her look really old.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
All of this is very curious.
Yes. Doors would slam on their own, the clock radio would spontaneously turn on, and strange sounds could be heard from around the house. Sometimes the pipes would just make loud noises, but other times it sounded like footsteps or furniture being dragged across the floor. And I honestly heard the sound of dragging furniture once in my house while everyone else was sleeping. I'm not even lying. I went into my daughter's room to look because I thought, what is she doing awake moving furniture? And I went in there and she was fast asleep and the lights were off.
That's creepy.
Mm-hmm.
All of these unexplained things are creepy.
It is creepy. George said that he and Kathy would be laying in bed and hear their heavy front door all of a sudden forcefully slam shut. He would go and look, but no one was there and the dog would be fast asleep.
And the door would be shut.
Mm-hmm. But they would hear this huge bang. One of the more controversial claims of the haunting was that a gelatin-like substance would randomly appear. George himself would say later that this was exaggerated by the book and the movies that were later made. Slime was not oozing from the walls, but they would find weird slime on areas of the carpet and such.
Okay.
It was reported that there was also a liquidy substance that would drip from the door handles that resembled blood. There were weird, unexplained smells reported as appearing in different areas of the house. One of the places in the house that this happened more commonly was in a secret room that they discovered in the basement. This room would smell like an open sewer pipe. It didn't constantly stink, though, but the smell would come and go. Some of you might know that demons are supposedly linked to a foul smell, similar to the smell of sulfur, which can smell like rotten eggs. Is this significant? Maybe. Regarding this hidden room, it's the original Red Room. Side note, but if you are a horror movie fan, you know that in The Shining, there is a reference to Red Rum, spelled R-E-D-R-U-M, which is murder spelled backwards. Those who know will know. So just when they're talking about it, they're like, this was the original Red Room. Before the Lutz family discovered this room, according to Butch, he told detectives that his father had carved out a hiding space in the basement where he kept a stash of money and gems, allegedly to do with his mob ties. I wonder if this was the hidden room that they found. Either way, they discovered a hidden room that was painted red inside and smelled of human excrement.
Where they tortured people for the mob.
They could have. You never know. Most of our minds would want to excuse things like this away, and we would tell ourselves that we didn't really see something because it's not logical. But the Lutz family knew that they had experienced these things. But I think you would start to question your own sanity.
Oh, you totally would.
Mm-hmm. As I mentioned, George was affected the most by the house. His personality changed. He became more easily angered, and his personal hygiene declined. Things got so dark and sinister that the family finally fled for their lives just 28 days after moving in. No one in the family will speak about the specifics that night. But I wonder if George was becoming more affected by the supposed evil presence there than he would like to admit. Could Butch DeFeo and George have been influenced by the same dark entity? On that cold and frightful last night in the home, the Lutzes fled with just the clothes on their backs and with their dog. They sped to Kathy's mother's house. Soon after, they left the state of New York. They wanted to get as far away from the house as possible. And when I say they left everything, they left everything. There were dishes from the dinner that night still in the sink. They left family heirlooms, all of their possessions, including some custom-made motorcycles of George's. The Lutz's belongings were auctioned off the following July after they fled. Their food and clothes were donated to the Salvation Army soon after they left. Interestingly, a cop bought George's beloved boat from the auction. He later was divorced and the boat caught fire.
It's a bad luck.
It was bad luck. And the family actually that moves in after this, it was said that their car just spontaneously caught on fire as well in the driveway. The couple sold their dream home at a substantial loss and managed the auction from afar.
But they were probably still happy just to be rid of it.
They were. After the Lutz family ran for their lives from the house, a local TV station, I think it was Channel 5, organized a paranormal investigation to take place inside the house. A very famous paranormal investigative couple headed up this investigation, and Melissa already mentioned them, Ed and Lorraine Warren. There have been multiple movies made about the cases they dealt with, including one of my favorite horror movies, The Conjuring, which I did make Melissa watch.
All of them.
Have we watched them all together?
I think so.
That's awesome. She even went to The Nun in the theater with me.
Although, isn't there a new one coming out?
There is. And have you seen the Annabelles? I don't think you've seen those ones.
With the doll?
Have you seen them?
I think we've watched.
She's in The Conjuring too, but have you seen like the Annabelle Origins?
Maybe I just remember her from...
Oh, now I know what we gotta do.
If we do that, you have to come to my house and drive home. We can make popcorn and put on the fire.
That'd be perfect. George agreed to give the Warrens the key to his house. However, he refused to come back to the house. They had to meet up 4 blocks away to get the keys. They met at a pizza place to get them. So he said, I'm not going closer than 4 blocks away.
I'm surprised he came back at all.
Me too. When the team arrived at the house, there was an immediate uneasy feeling, and it was said to stink of death. One of the teen members, upon entering, immediately levitated off the ground about 2 feet into the air. There is alleged videotape of this happening. It is said that Kathy also experienced this phenomenon while living there. Also upon entering the house, many of the men experienced sudden and significant heart palpitations, so bad that it brought them to their knees. One man actually had to be taken out of the house later because he collapsed during the investigation. And they were like healthy, fit men. Call it coincidence if you want, but since this time, all of the men who entered that house that day, except for one, died from heart-related problems, even eventually Ed. Ed and Lorraine spoke about this experience on their TV channel. You can watch it on YouTube. I had no idea they had a TV channel way back, but I was like, oh, I watched it twice.
Dedicated research for this one, guys.
I did. I watched so much. Upon entering, Lorraine went upstairs and Ed headed to the basement. He used a crucifix and commanded any spirit to reveal itself. Ed said he immediately felt like he was under a waterfall. He had immense pressure on his head and shoulders, and he fell to the ground. Next, he could feel pricks of electricity, and it was hard for him to breathe. He again commanded the spirit to leave, and he was able to go back upstairs. And Ed said this was unusual for him because he's not a clairvoyant, he's just a paranormal investigator. Lorraine, when she first entered the home, she had a vision of bodies laying together on the floor, covered in white sheets.
Because she is a clairvoyant.
She is. She thinks she saw the image of the DeFeo family right before they were carried from the house, and it would turn out to be the same spot that the bodies were lined up prior to transport. Lorraine said that they didn't know anything about the house before entering it, just that it was haunted. So she didn't know this whole family had been murdered. She just saw them laying there.
Hadn't it been a huge media trial?
Well, they weren't from there. I don't know how much the news had spread in 1974.
Okay.
Lorraine didn't know what was happening in the basement, but she too felt the sensation of pressure of being hit with forceful water. Next, Lorraine entered the sewing room, the same room that the priest had warned the Lutz family about. Once standing in that room, Lorraine looked at the guy next to her and said, quote, "I hope this is as close to hell as I'll ever get." Lorraine said that she could feel a great sense of depression inside the house. She also commented about how eerie it was to see all of the belongings of the Lutzes still inside the home. It was like someone was still living there. During investigation, an infrared camera was set up in the hallway outside of the primary bedroom. The camera was set to go off randomly throughout the night. One photo caught what appears to be the freakiest boy you ever saw peering out from another room, looking straight at the camera. When Missy later saw the photo, she said that it was of the little boy named Jody who came out to play with her. The only other person to ever see Jody in person was Kathy's sister-in-law when she was visiting one night, except she said he looked blue when she saw him, so unsure if what she saw was the same entity as Jody. But the photo was chilling, and it is believed to not be photoshopped. When I saw it, I actually kind of gasped. I was like, oh my goodness, there's a boy.
That's creepy.
It is creepy. I should have showed you these pictures before.
The amount of unexplained things makes this creepy.
It is.
Because it sounds like we can totally explain Butch's murder.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Butch was a dirtbag, and Butch chose to murder his family.
Mm-hmm.
But this stuff makes me wonder if he was influenced by a darker force.
It's definitely a little bit harder to explain.
Mm-hmm. And they still say that this photo of the little boy is not photoshopped, that it was an actual image caught that night. Some people say, oh, one of the people who came to be a part of the seance brought their little nephew, but who would bring their little nephew to an overnight seance in this house of all houses? It's not happening.
No.
Because there were so many skeptics, Ed and Lorraine agreed to undergo polygraph tests when the first movie about this haunting was coming out. Their test was administered by the number 2 person in the world to administer polygraph tests. We know that polygraphs are not an exact science, but they both passed. And the polygraph guy allegedly started reading his Bible again after administering the tests.
So he believed them.
He did. Because a best-selling book and super successful movies were made about the Amityville Horror, many skeptics believe that George and Kathy Lutz orchestrated this entire hoax as a get-rich-quick scheme. I believe that in the end they made just around $300,000 from the book, which George states was mostly true, but they pulled out of the movie deals because it strayed too far from the facts. So I don't think they were looking to just get rich, or they would have went full force with all of it.
Yeah.
The Amityville franchise has made truckloads of money, but George and Kathy made very little of that in comparison. One of the books published was by one of Butch's defense lawyers, more about the DeFeo murders. But there was also books made about the hauntings afterwards with the Lutz family. There were many movies, but 2 big blockbuster movies made about the haunting, and many other books and movies as well. Ironically, I feel like the haunting is more famous than the actual murders that took place inside this house of horrors.
Yeah, I think I'm more familiar with the hauntings than what Butch did.
Yes, definitely. For me, that's what the case was. So I made the sacrifice to watch both of the major movies made about this case. I took one for the team.
You're such a sacrifice. She loves horror movies.
I do. I'm totally joking. But I did watch them both.
And now she's going to make me watch them.
If I can. We'll see. The first one made is called The Amityville Horror and was the second highest grossing movie of 1979. George is played by James Brolin and Kathy is played by Margot Kidder. I think this version was more accurate than the subsequent one, but it was still exaggerated. And I didn't put this in here, but it was said that James Brolin totally believed the story, but that Margot Kidder didn't want to have anything to do with it after. So I don't know if she was freaked out or if she just totally didn't believe it. But they had very different takes on the movie. The second movie I had already watched, but I watched it again. It has the same name and was released in 2005. This one stars Ryan Reynolds as George and Melissa George as Kathy. This one is definitely a better horror movie, but they took a lot of creative licensing. George Lutz was apparently upset about how far from the story this movie was. This one goes more with the idea that George was becoming like Butch before he murdered his family.
And George didn't like that.
He didn't like that. So I don't know if it touched a nerve, if that was true and that's what happened, or if it was just so far-fetched.
And slanderous.
Yeah. But it's a horror movie.
Right.
The famous Amityville house is still standing, and from what I could tell, is occupied. When the things that happened inside this house hit the media, people went crazy for it. The new owners had to change the outside appearance of the home. They got rid of the eerie windows that resembled eyes and changed the address.
How do you change an address?
They had to go through whatever legal processes to actually have the address changed. I did find the address, but I'm not going to put it in here because they don't want people around. Because people were coming to the house nonstop to take a look and take whatever they could from the property with them. They even resorted to taking clumps of the lawn with them, just wanting a piece of the famous property.
And the evil that was there?
Yeah, they were wanting to take pieces home with them. Like,
no, thank you.
Heck no. I'd be like, George, I'll meet you at the pizza place 4 blocks away. Even though I would be so curious to go. I would probably go see it now.
Yeah. See it, not take it home.
No, I would not take it home.
Drive past.
I would stop and get out. You'd have to. I would want to know if I could feel anything different there.
Nope.
But you don't believe, so why not?
Because I'm a big scaredy cat.
What do you have to be afraid of if you don't believe anything,
It's
Melissa?
True. It's true. But what if?
Yeah. What if? Exactly. Despite its controversy, George and Kathy never wavered from their account of what happened inside the Amityville Horror house. The couple did divorce in 1980, and both have since passed away. Kathy died of emphysema in 2004, and George died in 2006 from heart disease. He also died with heart complications. As adults, the 2 Lutz's sons have told their accounts and claimed the hauntings were very much real. The Lutz's daughter has not brought herself to discuss what happened inside the house publicly. believe the hauntings or not, but the reason behind the alleged hauntings are real and are straight out of a horror movie. Some people believe that Butch DeFeo had to have been possessed by the devil or under the control of a demonic spirit to do the horrific things that he did. The family annihilation that took place in the Amityville house was very much real. But I will leave it up to you to decide if the subsequent hauntings were true. And that is the case of possibly the most famous haunted house of all time, and a son evil enough to murder both of his parents and all of his siblings while they slept. The brutal and violent dirtbag, Ronald, or Butch, DeFeo Jr.
That was a creepy case, Christy.
Mm-hmm. So, Melissa, what's your verdict? Is it haunted?
I'm on the fence.
You're on the fence about if it was haunted?
I'm not convinced he was possessed to kill his family. I think there's several things in his behavior and his character that are similar to other murders that we've covered. I think the motive is there for him to kill his family.
Right.
I do not have an explanation for all of the haunting stuff after, so I can't really make a comment on that.
You're going to sit on the fence on that.
I am.
But do you think even with Ronald Sr. saying that something evil was in the house, that something could have already been evil there? If there was an evil in the home to haunt it later, after the fact, could it have already been there?
That is curious because you did say that Butch was a sweet boy to begin with and then got angry as he got older.
Yep. And the father, even though he's this alleged mobster guy, was afraid enough to go and get the statues and call in a priest and was really worried about the evil in his home.
Right.
And George was apparently the type of guy who he was an ex-Marine, he knew martial arts, he hung out with motorcycle gangs, and he was so afraid that he fled the home and never went back. Well, I think there's something to be said there. Everybody knows I believe it's haunted. I totally believe it was haunted. I think there might have been an evil spirit in that home even beforehand, but I agree with Melissa that Butch knew what he was doing when he killed his family.
He was a dirtbag.
Yeah, and he got his just comeuppance.
That's right.
But listeners, please weigh in on this one. Go to our social media and tell us, what do you think? And we hope that you all have a spooky but safe and happy Halloween.
And we'll be back again next week with another dirtbag case.
Until then,
see ya.
Bye. Okay, good thing we tested. So now we have to test a third time.
What? This is like our fourth time.
Our 40 millionth time.
It's true.
We've been doing this since 1832.
Brigante.
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 I'm not going to say it with an accent.
Brigante. Oh, see, do you see? I'm working on my R's.
Yeah,
for Polish.
it's pretty good.
Brigante.
Brigante. Not eerie.
Yeah, it is.
And
Why did he get kicked out?
what?
Just let me go through it. Christy yawn.
I don't know. I'm so easy. I'm a cheap yawn. It's a problem for me. Like I said, even when I'm like editing, if one of us yawns, I yawn. And I'm like, dang you past Christy or dang you past Melissa. You're hanging me on. Well, you just go for it now. Don't hit your mic.
I don't know what I was thinking, how that would end any differently.
No, that one's already broken. Just leave it. Melissa's ruining our recording room. She tried to pull a tray with all these little, what are these called? Trays? Baskets? You know those rolly things with all the little baskets in them? She tried to pull it towards her to get the Kleenexes on top, and all the trays came out. Oh, that was great.
Oh, so I wouldn't hit my mic.
And now she's out of her chair and has to slink back in there without hitting her mic. Let's see. Oh, core work paid off today.
Oh, yeah.
She did it.
Like, oh, man.
That was a whole workout. I just witnessed it. She's spilled her soup at lunch.
Dump my phone in the soup.
Yep.
Could you imagine the same spirit possessing them both, and that's why they have similar countenances?
Last night when I went for my walk, I was like, what I see over there? What I see over there? Like in the
Because
field
you were
and stuff.
researching this.
I was. I'll pull out a Ouija board and we can ask them. Just kidding. I'll never do that ever. Don't send us one. We don't want it. Guess what? It's the same freaking day.
2 hours later, though.
Red rum, red rum, red rum, red rum, red rum, red rum.
Another Sound Off Media Company podcast.